The purpose of this podcast is to help you find more ways to be empathetic. Now, the fact that you're listening to this podcast shows that you are self-aware. To be empathetic means you have to put yourself in someone else's shoes. One way to put yourself in someone else's shoes is to imagine yourself suffering like someone else might. For example, you see a patient with serious health problems and just think how difficult his daily living will be, and imagine that if you were in his place, how much you would have to suffer. This little exercise will make you empathetic day by day, plus you will also gain a sense of gratitude. And even if you get through this entire podcast, you listen, you feel like you've gotten something out of it, I want you to keep trying improving. Because I'm not sure empathy is part of being human. It's something that we learn. Okay, so now that we know a little bit more about empathy, what it is, and why it's important, I think we could agree, yes. How can we be more empathetic? I mean, that is the purpose of this podcast, right? But let's think outside the box for a second. What about ways to become less empathetic? Okay, I know it's an interesting question. One way to become, I guess, less empathetic is, take yourself out of the other person's shoes by realizing what is yours versus what is theirs, that it's you versus them. As a family law attorney, I feel I'm a very empathetic person, and many times I have to put myself in my client's shoes, which is what I need to be able to do my job. But remember, it's an adversarial process. It's us versus them, plaintiff versus defendant, husband versus wife in a custody battle, whatever. But sometimes if the opposing party is unrepresented, maybe they're scared, they're confused, they just don't have the money to hire a lawyer. It's important. It's still important, even in an adversarial situation where, the plaintiff doesn't need or have to put themselves in the defendant's shoes, and the defendant doesn't have to put themselves in the plaintiff's shoes. Now, the lawyer for the plaintiff should put him or herself in the client's shoes. That's fine. No conflict of interest there. And same on the other side with the defendant. Whoever the attorney for the defendant is needs to put themselves in the client's shoes. Again, no conflict of interest there. But I guess it would be arguable that it's a conflict of interest for maybe an attorney to put themselves in the opposing party's shoes. But, when you're dealing with, I could see that you could argue that's a conflict of interest. But, when you're dealing with people who are just poor, they're going through a family law issue, it's very delicate. You have to be very careful with these things. It's okay to kind of try to maybe see where they're coming from, Empathize to some level with the opposing party, and it would probably be good because it would help you kind of manage expectations with your own client. And, just be careful. Don't take advantage of someone if they just don't know anything about the law. Okay, so we agree that if you focus too much on taking care of other people's needs or so empathetic to the point where you ignore your own self-care, that can be a problem. And I think we can try to fix this. You can still be empathetic, but just have boundaries. Have common sense boundaries. Don't let people take advantage of you. So you can be empathetic and prioritize yourself. That is possible. But, at the end of the day, you have to take care of yourself first, and it's not really always your responsibility to take on other people's problems or to help them fix themselves. You can be empathetic, but, you don't have to invest yourself in that person. I drive through the city, I see homeless people, I don't stop and help every single one of them, but I do empathize, I do. So it's okay to maintain that boundary, but still know where someone's coming from. Okay, so thank you for hanging in there with me on becoming less empathetic, or how you can maintain your empathy but also protect yourself at the same time. One way to protect yourself is just don't be empathetic. Another way to protect yourself is just keep good common sense boundaries but continue to be empathetic. Okay. Now let's get away from that a little bit and talk about how can I become more empathetic. This is going to seem extremely counterintuitive, and I use that term counterintuitive because that is a term that is commonly used and recognized. I tend to think that counterintuitive usually means it's counter habit or even counter culture. It's true that we think that being empathetic means being tuned into how others are thinking and feeling and being able to essentially share that emotional experience with them. By default, I think people will think that means that they need to become less selfish, but I'm going to actually argue that if someone wants to have empathy, they actually need to become more selfish. Let me explain. There's the type of selfishness in which a person takes away from, exploits and harms others in order to get some kind of gain. And then there's the type of selfish where a person just does what is good for them. They set boundaries. They say no when they want to instead of saying yes when they don't. They take better care of themselves long before they try to take care of others. This is the type of selfishness that I believe will help increase their empathy. All of us have issues, and the most effective way to make the world a better place is to work on ourselves. We can't put the world in order when our own house is a mess. Hold that thought. We tend to be more empathetic when we have alleviated more of our own pain. So, how do you increase your empathy? 1, become selfish and alleviate your pain, but during that period of selfishness. 2, your pain will increase if your selfishness is centered around taking away from or exploiting others. In other words, become selfish but leave everybody else out of it. Okay, so I covered what is empathy, how to be a little less empathetic, why a little bit of selfishness is okay. So now let's go into, is it possible to be too empathetic? If so, how would one know they were being too empathetic, and what should they do about it? Okay, what we're referring to is most likely a combination of being highly empathetic and having very weak boundaries. This is a combination that leads to codependency and enabling. You can never have too much empathy. It's beautiful. All it means is you are a naturally abundant person. In some circumstances, it is only safe to have compassion for others from a distance. If you are a highly empathetic individual, it is essential to learn what situations in your life drain your energy and what energizes you. It may be seen as a weakness to be this sensitive to energy, but it is a blessing in disguise. Your energy system is constantly telling you what life choices serve your health and ultimately the highest good for all. Just like Earth's natural resources, your energy must be protected and used in sustainable ways. It can also mean making some difficult decisions and possibly making radical changes in your life. If you are constantly empathizing with someone who behaves inconsiderately or has unhealthy habits and doesn't get help, this is what is sometimes referred to as idiot compassion. If you notice your relationships appear to be one-sided, giving more than you receive, and you struggle to set limits and say no, These are clear indicators of too much. So what should you do? Learn to recognize your own needs in order to restore balance. Imagine you are a Supreme Court justice and you want to address gender inequality. But you empathize heavily with one of the side's belief that a woman's place is at home with the children and not in the workforce. Not only is social change impossible from this standpoint, but you're also out of a job. In short, the ability to see and feel other people's perspectives and experiences is a rare and wonderful gift. But use it wisely to restore and sustain balance, not to abandon what is right and true. Thank you for listening. Please consider subscribing.